December has a way of making you feel like you're the last person alive on a quiet, frozen earth. Welcome to Winds of Thought. I'm your guide tonight, here to help you step into a world of shadows and whispered secrets. If these stories find a home with you, please leave a like for the channel and share where you're listening from in the comments below. Your next story could be waiting there. I came from a stretch of the country that people sped through with their doors locked. The roads would shrink without notice. Your phone would show a single, stubborn bar of service. Distances were measured by landmarks, a crooked fence post, a dying oak, not by miles. Our home was a lonely fixture on 40 acres outside a forgotten town named Cedar Notch, a place most atlases considered too small to name. You don't understand the depth of that isolation until you leave and are foolish enough to return. Back then, though, it was my entire world. The house was a 2-story relic with a porch that sagged in the middle and paint that peeled faster than it could be touched up. My mother kept a small orchard to the south. It wasn't for selling, just a personal patch where she'd talk about a good season, even when the peaches came out scarred or half-eaten by squirrels. To the west, open fields rolled toward a treeline, split by our gravel drive flanked by ancient trees. But to the north and east, that was the deep woods. Not a place for weekend hikes. This was a choked, untamed wilderness that stretched for miles. Oak pine, brush so thick you could lose sight of a person 10 paces in. Every local had a tale about those trees. Lost livestock, fences found snapped, nighttime noises that didn't match any known animal. We learned young not to wander. By 19, I was sure I knew better. I'd started work at a carpentry shop in town, a place called Cobb and Son, run by a man named Luther who built furniture as if time had stopped in 1975. He never opened early. Luther believed dawn was for thought, and the doors stayed locked until 10 on the dot. In summer, that felt like a gift. In winter, it meant driving home in total darkness, tired and alone. My ride was an '86 Ford pickup that shuddered as if held together by prayer and corrosion. The headlights were dim ghosts, and the heater worked on its own mysterious schedule. That December arrived with a vicious, sudden cold. It seeped into your joints, the soil, every metal part of your car. Nights felt dense, as if the darkness had physical weight. Luther kept me late most evenings to finish holiday orders, and I didn't argue. I was saving to leave. The night it all went sideways was a Wednesday. I recall because my mother had made stew and I'd rushed out, promising I'd be back by 10. That didn't happen. I'd botched a cabinet door, cut the panel wrong in my haste. Luther spotted it as he was locking up. "A customer sees that. They see everything," he said, rapping the edge with his knuckle. "Fix it." So I stayed. By the time I killed the lights and stepped outside, it was nearly midnight. The cold was a physical blow. My breath plumed, and the wind carried the scent of frozen earth, distant wood smoke, and something metallic, like old coins. All I wanted was to get home. The usual route was the highway, but when I reached the on-ramp, flashing red and blue lights blocked it. An accident, maybe. Troopers had cones set up, waving traffic away. "Roads closed," one said. "Could be hours." I didn't question it. I turned around and took the back way, the long route of dirt roads and narrow lanes cutting through wooded land nobody used after sunset. About 15 minutes in, that old, familiar dread began to creep up my spine. Not quite fear, but a sharp awareness. The feeling you get when you sense a presence behind you before you hear it. I shook it off. I'd driven these roads countless times. Another mile passed, then another. The road deteriorated into potholes and washouts where rain had eaten the dirt away. I slowed, easing through a rough patch when the truck jolted violently. A loud bang echoed through the silent trees. The steering wheel jerked, and I wrestled the truck onto the narrow shoulder. Flat tire. Just perfect, I spat. I climbed out, my breath fogging thickly, boots crunching on the frozen gravel. I swung open the tailgate and climbed into the bed to get the spare. That's when my gut plummeted. The toolbox was torn open, not just unlatched. Pried apart, the metal bent, the lock shattered. Everything inside was gone. The tools, the spare, the jack, even the flimsy roadside kit. I stood there too long, staring stupidly as if it would all materialize back. Someone had stripped it clean. Out here in the absolute middle of nowhere. I checked my phone. No signal. A smarter person would have stayed put, waited for first light. Old Man Henderson drove this road every morning around 7:30. He'd have helped without a word. But I was frozen, furious at myself, and convinced I could make it. Home was maybe 5 or 6 miles off. I locked the truck, shouldered my backpack, and started walking. At first, there was only the immense quiet. My footsteps sounded alarmingly loud, carrying too far in the stillness. Then I began to notice something else. Movement. Not constant, but present. A rustle to my left. A distinct snap of a twig behind me. I told myself it was deer, but the sounds kept pace. When I slowed, they slowed. When I hurried, they followed. I stopped and whirled around once. The road behind me was empty. A little farther on, the trees opened into a small clearing where moonlight finally reached the ground. That's when I heard him. "Evening, son." The word son cracked at the end, sharp and intentional. I turned. He stood at the far tree line, half in shadow. Tall. Too tall. A long coat hung to his boots. A wide-brimmed hat was pulled low. But what froze my blood wasn't him. It was the creature beside him. At a glance, it looked like a large, black dog. Then my vision adjusted. His proportions were wrong. Too lean, shoulders too pronounced, legs elongated. It stood perfectly still, eyes locked on me as if awaiting a command. My legs were stones. "What brings you out here so late?" the man asked. His voice unnervingly calm that I swallowed, my throat dry. "Truck broke down. Headed home." He took a single step forward. "Road's not safe after dark," he said. "All sorts of things wander." The creature didn't blink. He came closer and I caught his scent. Old tobacco, damp wool, and beneath it something sour like spoiled meat. He smiled, but only his mouth moved. "Be mindful, son," he said softly. "Not everything out here wishes you well." Then he stepped backward. The underbrush seemed to swallow him whole. When my legs finally unlocked, they buckled. I hit the ground, trembling, lungs burning. I didn't wait to recover. I scrambled up and ran. I didn't stop until I saw the warm, distant glow of our porch lights. That's when I heard it again, whispered right behind my ear. "Evening, son." I didn't look back until I'd crossed into our yard. He stood at the treeline watching. Then he was simply gone. The next morning, my father listened in silence as I spilled the story. When I finished, he gave a single nod. "Sounds like Silas Greer," he said. "Lives out past the North Woods. Folks say he ain't right." I asked how he knew which way I was walking. My father didn't answer. We found my truck untouched. No tools, no tracks, nothing. I don't take the back roads anymore. And I never walk alone at night. Some presences in the dark aren't lost. They're patient. My youth was spent in a settlement people mentioned only to describe how far it was from anywhere worthwhile. It wasn't a town. Calling it a hamlet was generous. A few streets, a handful of shops that shuttered early, fields stretching out in every direction as if the land was trying to consume the place whole. If you stood at the right spot and looked out, you could believe nothing else existed. Everyone knew everyone else's business. That wasn't comforting. It was a slow suffocation. By my teens, I knew which marriages were fracturing, which families were drowning in debt, and which men to avoid eye contact with at the local pub. News didn't travel fast. Festered. Clung. Make one mistake, and they'd remember it longer than you ever would. I spent my childhood dreaming of escape. My parents were good people, worn down in the way adults are when life hasn't matched the picture they once held. My father took maintenance work where he could find it. My mother cleaned offices before dawn. They rarely complained, but I noticed the heavy silence when bills arrived. By 19, I was desperate for space. The city was only a 25-minute bus ride. But mentally, it was another planet. Lights burned late. People moved with purpose and didn't care about your lineage. Nobody asked about your family. The problem was the last bus. One route in, one route out. The final bus back left the city station at 8 on the dot. Miss it, and you were stranded unless you had taxi money or a friend's couch. Most nights, I watched that clock like a countdown to my own confinement. 8 o'clock meant the night was over before it began. That December felt heavier than most. I just quit a soul-crushing job stocking shelves overnight in a warehouse that reeked of bleach and despair. I told myself I'd find something better. Weeks bled into each other with nothing. I slept through mornings. I stayed up too late. A restless, unexplainable agitation hummed under my skin. That's when I started going to the casino. Not for the gambling. For the noise, the constant motion, the feeling that time had no meaning inside those walls. You could vanish there for hours. Most nights I went with friends. That night I went alone. I remember pulling on a jacket that was too thin for the cold, checking my pockets. "Don't be late," my mother called from downstairs. "I won't." I lied, the words automatic. The bus ride in was the same as always. Cracked vinyl seats, fogged windows, the driver who never spoke. I got off near the city center and felt that familiar, fleeting lift. The sense that something, anything, might happen. Inside, the casino was a capsule of artificial warmth and light. The floor gleamed. Machines sang their electronic chorus. I sat at a blackjack table because it felt like a game I could manage. It wasn't. Within 2 hours, I was wiped out. I stared at the green felt, half expecting the cards to rearrange themselves out of mercy. They didn't. I checked my phone. 7:14 p.m. Fantastic, I muttered. I hurried through the buzzing streets, heart sinking with each block. By the time I reached the bus stop, the digital sign already read, "Departed." I stood there, breath puffing in the cold, feeling profoundly stupid. Cab would cost more than I'd lost. Calling a friend wasn't an option. Everyone was across town or working early. That left the late bus. It didn't stop in the village. It stopped at the edge of the woods. I'd walked from there before. I told myself it was fine. The bus ride back was eerily subdued. Couple whispered upstairs. A man slept, hood pulled over his face. I took a seat alone and replayed every bad decision of the evening. I was so buried in my own regret that I almost missed my stop. Wait. I hit the button a second too late. The driver didn't glance back. The doors sighed open at the next shelter, and a wall of cold, damp air rushed in. I stepped off into slush that immediately soaked through my shoes. Everything smelled of wet metal and decay. I stood alone under a flickering street lamp and weighed my grim choices. The long, lit road or the shortcut through the woods. With a sigh, I headed for the path. I told myself I'd be home in 15 minutes. I told myself I'd be fine. I was dangerously wrong. I crossed the road and stepped onto the path without letting myself reconsider. By day, the entrance was just a narrow gap between a chain-link fence and some wooden posts. At night, it felt like a throat. My shoes made a sick, sucking sound in the mud. "Just get through it," I whispered, just to hear a voice. The path sloped down, gravel turning to thick mire. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn blew, long and lonely, echoing through the frozen air. It made me feel exposed. The railway bridge appeared suddenly. Concrete walls streaked with rust and layers of graffiti that looked like arguments frozen in time. My footsteps echoed sharply underneath, bouncing back at me. I slowed, instinct taking over. Nothing happened. I passed through, and the space opened into the flats. By day, it was an ugly, vacant lot. By night, it felt incomplete, as if someone had started clearing the land and then abandoned the project. Ahead sat a factory, dark and silent, its windows black eyes. Rusted car skeletons lay half-sunken in the mud, tires long gone. That's when I noticed the true quiet. No wind, no distant traffic, no animal sounds. I pulled my earbuds out, letting them dangle. The silence rushed in, thick and oppressive. I kept walking, but slower now. That's when the feeling began. It wasn't fear yet. It was the primal sensation you get when you're about to step off a curb into traffic. Your body recoils before your brain processes the threat. A feeling that something behind me mattered. I stopped, listened. Nothing. "You're just tired," I whispered. "That's all." I took a few more steps, forcing steady breaths. I was listening too hard. Every tiny sound was amplified. The pull of my shoe from the mud, the faint click of my jacket zipper. I thought about turning back. The road was boring but safe. Then a colder thought slithered in. If I turned back and someone had come in behind me, I wouldn't see them until it was too late. Standing still felt more dangerous than moving, so I pressed on. The worst section was next. To my right, the factory's metal fence ran straight and tall, topped with coiled barbed wire. To my left, the woods began with no transition, just pure darkness swallowing the world beyond the first few trunks. I kept my right hand on the cold fence for stability. The mud was deep here, with icy puddles that reflected nothing. I tried not to look into the trees. Every time I did, my chest constricted for no logical reason. "Almost through," I muttered. That's when my foot hooked on something solid, a buried root or piece of scrap metal. I pitched forward hard, landing on my hands and knees in the freezing mud. The shock knocked the air from my lungs. I hissed. I stayed there for a second too long, palms stinging, heart hammering. Then I heard it. Snap. Crunch. Snap. The sound didn't scatter like an animal. It moved with deliberate weight. I turned fast. He was already there, stepping out from the trees as if he'd been waiting just out of sight. He was tall, a full head taller than me, with broad shoulders under a dark coat. Long, stringy hair hung forward, obscuring most of his face. He paused, turned his head slightly as if checking behind himself, then faced me fully. He didn't speak, didn't shift his weight, didn't rush, just stood there about 15 feet away. My body locked up. Every internal alarm screamed at once. I tried to speak, to sound normal. "Hey, you okay, man?" What came out was a thin, broken noise. He took one step toward me. Slow, deliberate, not aggressive, certain. That was all I needed. I turned and ran. I didn't think about direction or slipping. I just ran. Mud splashed up my legs. My lungs burned instantly. I could hear him behind me. Not sprinting, not yelling, just heavy, steady footfalls keeping rhythm with my panic. I imagined a hand grabbing my jacket collar. I imagined falling. "Don't fall," I gasped. "Don't you fall." The path suddenly widened. The ground firmed. I burst out of the flats and into a park, legs screaming, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. I didn't hear him anymore. I didn't slow. I ran uphill past darkened houses, porch lights flicking on one by one as I tore through the neighborhood like a madman. My hands shook so violently I dropped my keys twice at my own door. "Come on. Come on," I whimpered, my voice cracking. The lock finally turned. I slammed the door, locked it, and slid down against it, gasping. I stayed there for a long time. I didn't look out the window. I never saw him again. I don't know how long he followed. I don't know how close he got. I don't know what he wanted, and I don't try to figure it out. Some nights, the only victory is making it home. I recall that winter like a scar. The way certain sensations stay with you long after childhood ends. I was still in school, marking time by semesters. Winter break had just begun, the lazy kind where you lose track of the days. It was December 26th, and the world felt dormant. I worked part-time at a pizza place in our town, Red Brick Pizza, a squat building squeezed between a hardware store and a vacant office. If you grew up there, you either worked there, dated someone who did, or knew someone who quit after a week. Every kid cycled through, bussing tables, answering phones, making deliveries when they were short. I was young enough that a paycheck felt like a fortune. No real bills. So when my manager asked if I could cover a shift, I always said yes. Holiday or not. That afternoon, I almost didn't go. Pulling on my hoodie, I thought, it'll be dead. Everyone's home with leftovers. Couldn't have been more wrong. By dinner time, the place was chaos. Every booth packed. A crowd at the counter. The phone wouldn't stop. The ovens blasted. And the air was thick with grease, melted cheese, and the damp wool of winter coats. "Hey!" My manager, Rick, yelled over the noise. 30s, perpetually exhausted, always chewing gum. You good for a run? Yeah, I said, grabbing my coat. Start with this one, he said, slapping a receipt on a box. Bit of a drive. I didn't check the address. I just nodded, tucked the pizza under my arm, and stepped into the cold. The first drop was quick. A well-lit house, someone waiting with cash. I was back in minutes, fingers numb. When I pulled in, Rick was there again. Got another. Single pie. I glanced at the ticket. The address was unfamiliar. Outskirts. How far? He shrugged. 20 minutes, maybe more. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. More miles meant more money. Outside, the world had gone silent. Not peaceful. Eerily empty, as if I were the last person awake. Snow drifted down, only visible in the cones of streetlights, dusting everything softly. I drove slowly, actually obeying the limit, savoring the calm away from the shop's chaos. The farther I went, the fewer houses appeared. Streetlights thinned. Trees crowded the road. My GPS announced I was close. The house wasn't in a neighborhood. It sat alone off the road, a long gravel drive vanishing into trees. The place was aggressively festive. Inflatable snowmen, plastic reindeer, lights wrapped around every railing and tree. The house itself was outlined in bright white bulbs, glowing against the dark woods. But the driveway was unplowed, covered in a smooth, unbroken blanket of snow. I had the immediate, sinking fear of getting stuck. I nudged my car just off the road, parked at an angle and shut it off. Stepping out, the cold cut deeper. I grabbed the pizza and started toward the house. That's when I noticed the disconnect. Every outdoor decoration blazed cheerfully, but the house itself was utterly dark. No glow from windows, no silhouettes, nothing. I slowed, scanning. As I neared, I saw footprints in the snow leading to the porch. Fresh, deep impressions. Okay, I muttered. They're home. But when I reached the porch, I stopped. The footprints didn't go to the front door. They curved off, disappearing around the side. A cold prickle ran up my neck. Not my business, I whispered. I knocked. Nothing. I waited, shifting, my breath fogging. After 30 seconds, I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. The quiet was immense. No TV, no voices, just the wind in the pines and the hiss of falling snow. I checked the receipt. Payment on delivery. Come on, I said under my breath, and knocked a third time. Nothing. My fingers were going numb. Irritation bloomed. The footprints were fresh. Someone was here. I knocked hard enough to rattle the door. Silence. By the fifth knock, patience was gone. Seriously, I said aloud. I'm freezing out here. I waited another moment, then turned back toward my car, the cold now feeling punitive. I hurried, set the pizza on the passenger seat, and climbed in. I turned the key. The engine sputtered. I frowned, tried again. Nothing. Come on, I pleaded, twisting the key harder. Caught for a split second, then died. My stomach dropped. No, no, no. I tried again. Same weak sputter, then silence. I slapped the steering wheel, breath coming fast. I looked up. That's when I saw him. A figure stood near the edge of the yard, where the porch wrapped around. Bundled head to toe, heavy boots, thick jacket, snow pants, a hood pulled low. I hadn't seen him come out. He was just there. I cracked my window. Hey, did you order a pizza? He didn't answer. Instead, he started walking toward my car. Not fast, not slow, measured, controlled. Something in his gait made my skin crawl. I've been knocking, I called louder now. For 5 minutes. No response. He kept coming. The realization hit me, cold and ugly. Something was very wrong. I slammed my door shut and locked it, hands clumsy. My heart hammered in my ears. I turned the key again and again, the engine refusing. The man didn't change pace. Felt like he knew I wasn't going anywhere. Panic flooded in. My shaking fingers found my phone. I dialed 911. It rang once. 911. What's your emergency? My car won't start. I blurted, voice cracking. I'm delivering a pizza. There's a guy outside. He's coming toward my car. Okay, the dispatcher said, calm. What's your location? I stumbled through the address. As I spoke, the man reached my window. That's when he finally spoke. You need help. His voice was low, deep, too calm. My blood went icy. How could he know that? I pressed the phone to my ear. He's right here, I whispered. At my window. Sir, stay in the vehicle. Officers are on their way. Outside, the man shifted, peering in. His eyes were shadows under the hood, but I felt their weight. You look cold, he said. Car trouble. I didn't answer. His tone shifted, a thread of impatience. He glanced around, then tried the door handle. Locked. His jaw tightened. I kept trying the ignition, whispering silent, desperate pleas. Then he reached into his pockets. One, then the other. His movements grew frantic. No, no, he muttered, barely audible. Then he punched the window. Once, twice. The sound was sharp, violent. I screamed. The glass held, but shuddered. He backed up, breathing hard, eyes wild. Then he turned and ran back toward the side of the house. I sat frozen, phone still at my ear. Stay with me, the dispatcher said. Can you see him? He ran around the house, I said, voice trembling. I think he's getting something. 2 minutes felt like an hour. I stared at the trees, the driveway, every shadow. My mind raced. Stay or run? If I ran, where? Dark woods, deep snow, no lights. Then I saw them. Red and blue flashes, faint in my rearview. Relief hit me so hard I started crying. At that same moment, the man reappeared from the side of the house. Something was in his right hand. I couldn't see what, and I didn't need to. He saw the lights, too. For a split second, our eyes met. Then he bolted, vanishing into the trees as if he'd never existed. The police arrived seconds later. 2 cruisers, lights cutting the dark. They searched the property, the woods. No one found him. The truth emerged. The house was empty. The owners were away for the holidays. The decorations were on a timer. The footprints weren't theirs. An officer checked under my hood and shook his head. Something's been tampered with, he said quietly. You got lucky. I never took another delivery after that. Every December, when snow falls and streets go quiet, I think of that driveway, that dark house, that man, and how close I came to never leaving. I was 21 that December, and nothing in my life fit together. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet, persistent wrongness, as if I'd missed a crucial turn years ago and kept driving because stopping seemed worse. I lived in a second-floor apartment in West Alder Grove, a patch of Southern California just far enough from the coast to lack the charm, but close enough to make the rent a crime. The complex was a maze of beige buildings, identical balconies, and parking spots that never belonged to the right person. December there didn't bring snow. It brought colder nights, longer shadows, and a strange stillness that made everything feel unfinished. I worked 2 jobs. Mornings in a warehouse that smelled of cardboard and spilled energy drinks. Nights at a takeout spot wedged between a vape shop and a nail salon. Always tired, always broke, always telling myself it was temporary, while feeling it was permanent. My roommates had stopped pretending we were friends. We shared space, not lives. One night, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, Miles cleared his throat. Theo and I are moving. I muted the TV. When? End of the month. To where? Brooklyn, Queens, somewhere back east. His cousin has room. They said it casually, as if it didn't mean my rent was about to double. As if the last tether holding me to that place wasn't severed. I didn't argue. I already knew I wasn't staying. My mom had left 2 months prior, packed a rental truck, and headed to Silver Mesa, Nevada. A fresh start, she called it. Cheaper. Quieter. She told me to come. I didn't want that kind of emptiness. The only real option was my Uncle Roy. He lived outside Briar Hollow, Colorado. Mountains, snow, silence. You can stay as long as you need, he'd said on the phone. No pressure. Just don't freeze. It sounded like relief. The only obstacle was my car. It had been dying a slow death. A dull silver sedan with faded paint and a driver's seat that leaned permanently left. The check engine light was a permanent fixture. Back in July, it overheated on the freeway, steam pouring from the hood. The tow truck mechanic didn't sugarcoat it. Blown head gasket. You're better off lighting it on fire. I laughed. He wasn't joking. I didn't have the money to fix it. So, like any broke person, I ignored it. Drove slower. Kept water in the trunk. Turned the heater on full blast in summer when it threatened to overheat. Every drive felt borrowed. By December, it barely started. I knew it wouldn't survive a mountain pass. So, one night after a late shift, I sat on my bed and posted an ad. Car for sale. Engine issues. Good for parts. Best offer. I stared at the screen before hitting post. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I buy dead cars. Can come tonight. I hesitated. It was already dark, cold, quiet, but I needed it gone. We agreed to meet in the apartment lot. By the time he showed, the sun was long gone. The air had that sharp post-sunset bite. I zipped my jacket and stepped out. An SUV pulled in. Dark-colored, idling. The headlights stayed on. A man got out. Mid-30s, maybe. Stocky jacket zipped to his neck. "Hello," he said. The thick accent. Flat. Not hostile. "Hey," I replied. "You the seller?" "Yeah." We walked to my car. Embarrassment crept in. The dents. The cracked mirror. The faint scent of burnt oil. I got in, turned the key. The engine coughed. Shuddered. Rattled like it was arguing. Then died. I let go of the key. "That's about it," I said. He sighed quietly. "You say engine problem. Head gasket." He circled the car slowly, hands in pockets, eyes cataloging everything. "You ask 400. That's the listing." He stopped, looked at me. 150. A short laugh escaped me. "That's low." He shrugged. "Scrap." I thought of the bus ticket I'd need. The boxes in my room. How much I just wanted this over. "Fine," I said. 150. His mouth twitched. "Good." He went back to his SUV for paperwork. "You cold?" he asked. "Sit inside." "I'm all right," I said. He looked at me again. "It is cold." "I'm fine." He opened the passenger door anyway. "Sit. Get warm." The way he insisted made my stomach tighten. "I'll stand," I said. He reached out slightly, not touching, but close. "Just sit." I didn't want trouble, didn't want a scene, so I perched on the seat's edge, 1 foot outside, door open. The interior smelled of cheap air freshener over something stale. He watched me too closely as he wrote. Then he got into the driver's seat. I stepped out immediately. He paused. "No cash," he said. "ATM. I go now." "You come." My heart skipped. "You said you had it." "Faster." "I'll wait." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Car is here." "You think I don't return?" I forced a thin smile. "Got dinner going." He studied me a long moment, then shrugged. "I return." He drove off. I stood there longer than needed, listening to the quiet lot, a cold certainty settling in my chest. I didn't know what had almost happened, but I knew enough to be grateful I hadn't gotten into that SUV. The lot went quiet. Not dramatic, just normal night quiet. A few porch lights buzzed. A TV laugh track drifted from a window. Everything looked the same, but felt profoundly different. I stood by my car, keys clenched, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. I walked the long way around the complex, past the laundry room, the dumpster, as if to prove the world was still normal. My breath plumed. My fingers ached. Back upstairs, I locked the door and threw the deadbolt. Twice. I hadn't done that in months. I didn't sit. I went to the balcony overlooking the lot entrance, where I could see headlights the moment they turned in. That's when my hands started shaking. Not violently, just enough to notice. I leaned on the railing, phone in one hand, the other shoved in my pocket, and waited. My mind replayed the moment he told me to sit. The way he didn't ask. The way he acted like it was decided. I imagined saying yes. Every imagined version ended the same way, with me realizing my mistake too late. About 15 minutes later, headlights appeared. Same SUV. I felt no relief, only alertness. I watched him park, get out, scan the lot, spot my car. I waited until he was beside it before going down. This time, I kept my distance, stayed near the stairwell. "Here," he said, holding out the money. Exactly $150. Crisp bills, not a messy wad of 20s from an ATM. I took it. We finished the paperwork in near silence. His pen scratched. He tore off a copy, handed it to me. "All good." "Yeah." He got back in the SUV, started it, and drove away without a glance. I stood there until the sound faded. Only then did I breathe. I didn't sleep much that night. Every passing headlight woke me. My body stayed tense, as if it hadn't gotten the message that the danger, whatever it was, had passed. The next morning I called my uncle. "I'm coming sooner." "Good," he said. "Snow's coming tomorrow. Roads will be empty." I packed what fit into 2 duffels and a backpack. Left the furniture, the junk, the version of me that thought staying was easier. I took a bus out of the city. As it pulled away, I watched the buildings thin, palm trees give way to brown hills. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. Colorado was cold in a way California never was. The air felt heavier, cleaner. The snow made everything quieter, as if the world's volume had been turned down. My uncle's place sat at the town's edge, surrounded by trees and open land. At night, the darkness felt deep, but honest. Not crowded, not threatening. Took weeks for the tension to leave my body. Sometimes in bed, I'd still think of that SUV, the insistence, how close I came to stepping fully inside. Nothing dramatic happened after. No police report, no follow-up, no confirmation of intent. And that's what stuck. Because real danger rarely announces itself. It arrives quiet, polite, almost reasonable. It requests instead of demands. Looking back, I wasn't brave. I didn't do anything heroic. I just finally listened to that small, steady voice that said something was off. Even when I couldn't explain why. I still have the paperwork in a box. Proof I sold the car. Proof I walked away. Every December, when nights grow long, I think how easily that story could have ended differently, and how thankful I am that it didn't. I'd lived in Red Hollow Township most of my adult life, mostly because nothing ever happened. People hear the name and think Erie, but it's just a quiet patch of rural Midwest between long county roads and miles of empty land. No sidewalks, no streetlights past a certain point. Houses spread so far apart you only hear your neighbor with a chainsaw or snowblower. I moved into my place almost 8 years ago after my divorce. 1-story, unfinished basement. A wide backyard that melted into open fields. The previous owner died of a heart attack, natural causes. Around here, every house has history. You stop caring or you go mad. December was always my favorite. Not for the holidays, but for the quiet. Snow muffles everything. The world feels smaller, safer. That illusion matters. That night began like any other winter evening. I'd taken the day off because forecasts warned of high winds and possible whiteout conditions by nightfall. The kind of storm where they tell you to stay home. I woke early, made coffee, sat by the fireplace longer than usual. The wood crackled intentionally, as if it knew I was listening. I spent the day on small tasks. Fixing a hinge, reorganizing a closet, tossing old mail. Nothing important. The TV stayed on, news channel, low volume for company. Around 5, the wind began hitting the house hard enough to rattle windows. Not violent, but constant, like something pacing outside. The meteorologist said, "If you don't need to be out tonight, don't be." I smiled. Wasn't planning on it. By 7, snow fell so thick the backyard lights barely penetrated. I switched to a sitcom rerun, pulled a blanket over my legs. That's when I heard it. Not a sound. A shift. The kind you notice because everything else is so loud. I turned toward the back of the house. The wind howled, driving snow sideways. I stood and walked to the sliding door. First, only white. Snow rushing at an unnatural angle. Visibility was 0. Then something darker moved through it. I leaned closer. A figure. Someone was walking through my backyard. Not running. Not stumbling. Just walking. Steady. Calm. As if it were a mild afternoon. My stomach tightened. The yard is big, open land leading to a distant road, but nobody walks out there, especially not in a storm. The figure moved left to right, head slightly down, coat pulled tight. Couldn't see a face. The snow swallowed them before they reached the trees. I stood there, waiting for a reappearance. None. I told myself it was someone with car trouble, a neighbor cutting through. Still, the calmness of the walk bothered me. No urgency, just direction. I returned to the couch, but the comfort was gone. Every sound felt sharp. The wind, the fire, the fridge cycling on. 5 minutes later, a knock on my front door. I froze. The knock wasn't frantic. 3 solid, controlled taps. I didn't answer immediately. Another knock, same rhythm. I stood slowly, walked to the door quietly. I cracked it open, chain latched. A man stood on my porch, heavy winter jacket, snow on his shoulders. His nose was bright red, skin pale from the cold. His breath came in sharp clouds. He forced a small smile. "Hey, sorry to bother you." His voice shook, convincingly. "Yeah, I'm waiting on a ride," he said. "Phone died. They're supposed to be close." But, he gestured at the storm. "Any chance I could warm up for a minute?" I hesitated. Up close, I couldn't tell if this was the same person. Similar build. Maybe. "I don't really let people in," I said carefully. He nodded quickly. "I get it. Totally. Don't blame you." That should have reassured me. Didn't. I glanced past him. Empty street. Just wind-driven snow. "I can let you wait on the porch," I said. "There's an overhang. Keeps the snow off." His smile faded a fraction. "Yeah," he said. "That's fine." I closed the door and locked it before he could say more. Through the window, I watched him move to a chair against the wall and sit. I told myself I'd done the right thing. Guilt crept in anyway. It was dangerously cold. I went upstairs, found an old, oversized jacket in the closet, warm but torn at the cuff. I headed back down, jacket in hand, fingers on the deadbolt. That's when something made me stop. I can't explain it. No sound, no movement, just a pressure in my chest saying don't. I leaned, looked through the peephole. The man was no longer sitting. He was standing directly in front of the door, close enough that I could see one eye through the warped glass. His hand rested on the handle, not knocking, not waiting, just holding it. Ready. My heart slammed so hard I thought he'd hear it. I stepped back slowly, breath shallow. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands, dialed 911, whispering as soon as they answered. "There's a man on my porch. I think he's trying to get in." They asked questions. Address, description, told me officers were coming. While she spoke, I watched the door. It didn't move. When she told me to stay quiet, I nodded. After a minute, I crept back to the peephole. The porch was empty. No man. No footprints visible in the blowing snow. Nothing. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched, found nothing, said I probably did the right thing. I didn't sleep that night. Sometimes, I still think about what would have happened if I'd opened that door. And sometimes, on stormy nights, I swear I hear 3 steady knocks, carried on the wind. I remember December by its heavy quiet more than its cold. I'd moved to Briar Hollow, an unincorporated town tucked between highways and protected woodland, about 3 years before. The kind of place where delivery drivers call to ask if your house is the one past the rusted mailbox. It wasn't charming. It was empty, affordable, quiet. I worked remote long before it was normal. Data compliance for an insurance firm. Not exciting, but steady. Most days, I spoke to no one outside of Zoom calls and the grocery cashier. That suited me. After a bad breakup and a messy city lease, I wanted space. Real space. That's why I adopted Luna. A mixed-breed rescue. Part shepherd, part something heavier, with one ear that never stood up. Nervous around strangers, glued to my side. The shelter said she'd always be alert. I thought that meant she'd bark at the mailman. I didn't know how much that alertness would matter. December that year was brutal. Not pretty snow. It snowed almost daily, thrown sideways by the wind. Drifts piled like frozen waves. Power flickered. By mid-month, everyone in Briar Hollow had stopped pretending winter was anything but survival. That Thursday started typically. "I'll circle back after lunch," my supervisor said through a screen of frozen faces, her voice crackling. My internet had been spotty all week. Weather, old lines. "Sounds good," I said, unsure if she heard. By late afternoon, the connection was barely holding. Audio dropped. Video froze. I think I spent a full minute nodding at a screen frozen at 4:12 p.m. At 6:30, everything cut out. No warning, just silence. I stared at my reflection in the dark monitor, then leaned back. Outside, the wind howled, making the windows hum. "Well," I muttered, rubbing my eyes, "guess that's that." Luna lifted her head from her bed near the desk, tail thumping once. "Want to go out? Just real quick." She didn't love the cold but followed, nails clicking on hardwood. I pulled on boots, a thick jacket, a knit cap that smelled of last winter's wood smoke. Opening the door, the cold slapped me. Already dark, sky low, snow blew in sharp bursts, stinging my cheeks. Luna stepped out cautiously, nose low, ears twitching. "Go on," I urged, shivering. "Hurry." She moved toward the side yard where the fence line blurred into shadow. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, breath fogging thickly. That's when I noticed him. At first, I thought it was a mailbox or a signpost, something dark against the white. Then it shifted slightly. Person, standing at the edge of the road. Not walking, not waving, just standing, facing. I wasn't sure. Me? The house? The trees behind it? I squinted, my heart giving an uneasy kick. Who would be out here in this? Briar Hollow had no sidewalks, no bus stops, no foot traffic, especially not in a wind advisory. Luna finished and trotted back, tail tucked. Okay, I said, already backing toward the door. I didn't look at the road again. Inside, warmth returned. I locked the door out of habit, wiped Luna's paws. "Crazy weather," I murmured. I turned on the TV, volume low, letting the local news fill the quiet. Warnings about icy roads, a stalled snowplow. Nothing urgent. I curled on the couch with a blanket. Luna pressed against my leg. 10 minutes passed. Luna's body went stiff. She lifted her head slowly, ears forward, a low rumble in her chest. "What is it?" I whispered. She stood, hackles raised, eyes locked on the front door. Then she growled. Not a play growl. Not a warning at deer. This was deep, serious. My stomach dropped. I muted the TV, listened. First just wind. Then soft, deliberate crunching. Footsteps. Not approaching the door. Pacing. I stood slowly, walked to the window beside the door, careful and quiet. The curtains were closed, but I could see movement underneath, shadows shifting. I crouched, lifted the fabric just enough. Boot prints cut across the fresh snow on my patio, back and forth, overlapping. Whoever it was had been there a while. I watched as a figure moved past the window, close enough to see the dark outline of a jacket sleeve. My throat went dry. The person stopped near the corner of the house, just out of sight. I let the curtain fall, backed away, pulse pounding. What the hell? I breathed. Luna stopped growling after a moment but didn't relax. She stayed standing, eyes fixed on the door. I stood there a long time, barely breathing. Eventually, the footsteps faded. No handle rattle. No knock. Just gone. I debated calling the police, picked up my phone, set it down. What would I say? Some guy walked around my porch in a snowstorm? I hated how small it sounded. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Too quietly. I checked the locks twice, then a third time. Took Luna out again around 10, scanning the road first. Nothing. Just wind, snow, the crunch of my own boots. By bed, exhaustion pulled hard. I turned off the lamp. That's when I saw Luna standing in the doorway. She hadn't jumped on the bed as usual. She just stood, body rigid, tail low, staring past me into the dark hallway. "Luna," I whispered. "Come here, girl." She didn't move. My heart began to race. I sat up slowly. "What's wrong?" She let out a soft whine, eyes never leaving the darkness beyond the door frame. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. I slid out of